Thursday the 20th of February, and what a week in sport it's been. Live Golf has been run and won, cricket is hotting up, and the footy season is just around the corner. Hookie is with us for his opinion on sports hot topics and local sport. Golfers Sophie Hilditch and Heath Riches join us to preview the SA Pennant season. So pull up the windows, pop on the aircon, crank up the volume, and let's get into Hooked on Sport. G'day, Hookie.
What a start, Wallace. I'm pretty excited myself. I tell you why else I'm excited. I'm coming to you live from Adelaide Oval. We are in the middle of day 3 of the Sheffield Shield game, and I'm looking at you on my computer screen, and straight above it, I am looking straight down the pitch at Adelaide Oval.
Brilliant.
I'm doing this from the Triple M radio booth, so it doesn't get a much better view, to be honest. South Australia done very well after a bit of a wobbly start. They bowled out for 93, but bowled out Tasmania for 101. They're now 388 all out in the second innings, and Tasmania no wicket for 8, just having started with the chase for, what would it be, 381 runs to win. So, yeah, South Australia, top of the table, and a really good opportunity to extend that lead as well. So they've played exceptionally well despite that wobble in the first innings. We might talk about them a little bit more later on. But, yeah, great to be with you, and it'll be interesting to see if I can manage talking about all these other sports while this cricket's going on right in front of me.
You know, we started back on air in September last year, and the great news this month has seen our largest numbers of listeners. So big thanks to everyone for listening and helping us to continue to grow the podcast.
Am I right that we've had some interstate and overseas listeners as well, Wallace? You're the numbers man with all of this.
Obviously, Australia ranks number 1 for our listeners, Hookie. But yeah, we've had people from Singapore, the United States and the UK. And it did get me wondering if these listeners are potentially South Aussies living overseas. So if you are...
They're not accidents, are they? They're not people who just went looking for something that had nothing to do with us and started to wonder what on earth have they caught up with listening to two knuckleheads talk about South Australian sport.
Well, I haven't included Turkey, who has had one listener. So if you are...
Turkey's is about right.
2 turkeys talking on the pod.
Yeah.
So if you are listening from overseas, you're a South Aussie, reach out, get in contact via the socials, send us an email, and we'll give you a shout out.
Brilliant.
What's going on this week in sport, Hookie?
Well, so much. I tell you what I have been interested in, and I want to ask you this first up. There's been the renewed debate about whether state of origin AFL football is viable. It was massive when I grew up as a young kid. It was the biggest thing in the 1980s. It was bigger than any SNFL football or any VFL football as it was known back then. And the rise of the AFL sort of killed off state of origin football on the back of what has happened with the Indigenous All-Stars team that played Fremantle on the weekend. There does seem a bit of a renewed push for state of origin football. Now, Wallace, you grew up in Sydney. You barracked for the Sydney Swans. You're a South Australian now, but where do you sit on state of origin in particular, because it's going to be largely driven by the rivalry between South Australia and Victoria?
Yeah, I get where you're coming from. I mean, when the VFL was the VFL, state of origin really relevant. Obviously, in rugby league, you've got New South Wales and Queensland, blockbuster games every year. My view on it is I think it'd be great to do something like that, but let's look at maybe the first-year players or a certain age profile of players that might play the interstate competition. And what we see then is we see a preview, which most people would never see, of the up-and-comers, those people that are going to play AFL in the future.
Don't mind that. I hadn't thought about it. An under-23 state team taking on an under-23 Victorian team, that would be fascinating. Yeah, I don't mind that at all. I just actually think that this is got some legs and got some viability. There will be some encouragement amongst the players to drive a bit of that buy-in. But I'm really conscious, Wallace, that and New South Wales and Queensland are on the receiving end of this all the time, but there's always that go-home factor. Players who get drafted to one of those 4 northern clubs routinely want to come home. And I do think that the concept of state of origin does assist, facilitates that sense of belonging back to your home state, in particular if you're not someone who wants to make the return to the Adelaide Crows or Port Adelaide. So I do think it's got some capacity in facilitating that. The other thing that I think would be worth experimenting it for, and why it's got some merit, on top of the fact that the crowds would love it. But I'm always interested with the way Keith Thomas, who was the former CEO of the Port Adelaide Football Club, framed the rivalry between the Port Adelaide and the Norwood football clubs and the Port Adelaide and the Adelaide Crows football clubs in the modern era of the AFL. He was adamant that the Port Adelaide Norwood rivalry that we saw in the 70s and 80s in particular, I suppose, was a rivalry that was tough, but it was built on respect. It was built on two organisations that had a deep sense of understanding of what each other meant to the competition. And Keith would often say that the rivalry between Port Adelaide and the Adelaide Crows in the AFL really has been developed on a basis of toxicity, that there is unedifying elements of the rivalry between these two clubs. And I just wonder whether a part of that was because these two clubs, Port Adelaide and Norwood, did come together in the 80s for the good of the state cause of state of origin. And I wonder whether, knowing that Port Adelaide and the Adelaide Crows are going to be the two clubs that are going to provide a majority of the players to any state of origin team, that might just assist in some small way in facilitating that. So I think there's some challenges around it. I do think you need to get buy-in from the players. I would encourage the AFL, if they were going to go down that road, to open up these games as one part of the road towards all Australian selection. I think there should be bonuses in your contract if you're selected to play for a state of origin team, I think, and if you're front up. So all of those things I think are worth considering, but I would just love to see it. And so long as it's got some meaning to it and there's some value on the end of it, and whether they play a series over 3 years or something along those lines, I do really believe that there's some legs in it. The fans would embrace it. And the players would ultimately embrace it as well. So my fingers are crossed, Wallace.
Now, Hookie, the Champions Trophy starts this Saturday night. Does Australia have any chance?
Probably not. They are missing a lot of players, so that is going to make it very, very difficult for them. In particular, really, none of their first choice bowling attack is going to be available through injury and all of the other challenges around it. So this would be a huge result if Australia was to find their way through here. I think they'll be very successful with the bat. These wickets are going to be relatively flat in Pakistan, and that will suit the way the Australians will bat. Now, Jake Fraser-McGurk, Matt Short, Travis Head, they're all going to go hard right from the start. It's the way they've been preparing, even on marginal wickets. We've seen their one-day form's been terrible in Sri Lanka and in Australia. But I think that's because they've been playing on wickets that haven't suited the type of cricket that they expect they'll need to play when they arrive in Pakistan. Well, they're already in Pakistan and they begin on Saturday night against England. So, I think if they get the right wickets and their batters do come off, they're going to play a pretty high-risk form of 50-over cricket. But if they can get the right wickets and bat in a manner that they want to bat and be able to bat for long enough, then they're going to post some big scores, and who knows what happens from there. But I just feel like Australia is a little bit too undermanned, and this might be a bridge too far. I think what you're going to see as well, Wallace, is that there'll be a number of retirements from the Australian one-day team in the immediate aftermath of this competition. Marcus Stoinis was selected for the Champions Trophy team and opted to retire anyway. And I know that he's got plenty of irons in the fire with one-day and T20 tournaments. But generally, Australia plays its one-day as overseas, and that's bold. So there you are. Nathan McAndrew has the first wicket. Jake Weatherald is out for 6. Tasmania 1 for 13. So don't think I'm allowed to commentate live. I don't think I've paid the rights fee, Wallace, to be commentating Sheffield Shield live.
I just noticed it on the app. Can I ask you the question? What the
but there it is. So 1 for 13, big wicket Nathan McAndrew, who has been undoubtedly the number one player in the Sheffield Shield this season. So Weatherald let that go, and it's just cannoned into the top of off stump. So great start for South Australia as they try and bowl out Tasmania with 381 runs to play with. If I can just return back to the Champions Trophy and everything surrounding that, the really, outside of the IPL, the rich vein of money-making territory for any cricketer who plays T20 cricket is in sort of August and September before the Australian summer gets underway again. So there's the 100, there's Major League Cricket in the US, and a lot of the guys I think are going to want to be able to sign up for that. And if you are expected to play one-day cricket for Australia, there can be a conflict there. So I think you'll see maybe 3 or 4 players might retire from the Australian one-day team, knowing that there's really no more one-day games of consequence for another year and a half until we start heading towards a World Cup. So that is on watch for me. And yeah, so if these guys pulled off this result, I think that would be quite incredible. But they just look undermanned to me, and probably a little bit one-dimensional for the way they're going to try and play. So look, you can't win them all, and I'm happy for them to prove me wrong. They certainly proved me wrong after the first test against India in the Border Gavaskar Trophy this year. Maybe that'll happen again, Wallace. If you're enjoying this podcast, I'd encourage you to take a listen to Beyond the Club. It's a project I've been working on with Flinders University. Now I co-host it with Professor Sam Elliott, and we break down all the latest research on how to maximise the experience of junior and club athletes. There's a range of resources, special guests, and cutting-edge info on how you can make your club a safer, happier place for your kids and their club mates. Beyond the Club, wherever you get your podcasts.
Now, Hookie, we touched on the SA cricketers. They're looking like they're closing in on back-to-back finals.
Really impressive. This has been a wild game. There's 20 wickets that fell on the first day, and then South Australia's batted for about a day and a half after that. The one thing I'll just make this point, 388 South Australia scored in the second innings, not one century amongst them. It was just a solid contribution from so many guys. So we got a half century from Connor McInerney, half century from Jason Sangha, close to a half century from Harry Nielsen, half century from Liam Scott. South Australia, this is probably a bit unfair, but maybe historically has been successful when its big names have performed. Ironically enough, yesterday, the 1963-64 Sheffield Shield winning team was here. Now, 5 of the members of the team, probably the most important player of that team that year was a guy called Sir Garfield Sobers, who was the leading run scorer in the competition, the leading wicket taker in the competition, and was equal for the leading catcher in the competition. Incredible story, isn't it, what Sir Garfield Sobers did that year? And you go back through years where South Australia's been successful in the Shield. Darren Lehman has really stood up. David Hooks has really stood up. They've been the results of our previous 2. So, yeah, the fact that this is a real team group, I think, is something really exciting to me. And, next weekend, we are trending towards South Australia playing in a one-day final for both the men and the women. So I'm tremendously proud. Just to clarify, I am doing a week of work for the South Australian Cricket Association. So that's why I'm at Adelaide Oval now. And I am a little bit white-knuckled. When you're working for the organisation, you live and die a little bit more on how they're performing. So I'm really pleased with what I've witnessed, in particular since about tea time on day 1 of this match.
Now, Live Golf has been run and won. What are your thoughts on this year's event and the move to North Adelaide?
Yeah, look, another outstanding event. Everyone involved in putting Live Adelaide together deserves more than just a pat on the back. It has been quite incredible. Once again, what Adelaide has been able to unearth from essentially nothing. Our capacity to develop a sporting theatre from a sport that hasn't really been seen before in Australia is unrivaled. And as usual, like we did with Formula One, like we did with the Tour Down Under, there are going to be organisations desperate to take it away from us. That was demonstrably the case with members of the Victorian opposition, certainly looking to muscle in on a chat with Greg Norman and Scott O'Neill, who's the new CEO of Live. So the fact that South Australia signed the deal for essentially 2031, it's quite incredible. They do have some challenges. They've got to work out what they're going to do before they do move to North Adelaide. What would you do, Wallace? I mean, Grange has held it for 4 years. I think that they are lukewarm about going any further. I imagine if it goes to Grange for 2027 and potentially 2028, someone's going to have to sign an almighty cheque, aren't they?
As we've discussed before, there's no other course that could hold it just because of the sheer size of it. I think if they do North Adelaide up, then they've obviously got, the tennis centre, which I think would address that issue that you've got with it, that it's not used enough. And also the Adelaide Oval number 2 could also be used for entertainment as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's the end of the contracts for a lot of these really, really well-known golfers. And if they don't sign them again for another 4 years, then you've got a lot of people in Australia just will have never heard of.
Yeah, your point's well made. That is the curiosity, isn't it? The extent to which we're on our own here in Australia with the embrace of live golf, and we understand the reasons why. We just haven't seen any top end professional golf here in Australia for many, many years. So it stood to reason that we were going to get pretty excited about it. The other thing I think about golf in Australia, Wallace, is that it's egalitarian. It doesn't matter whether you're a member at Kooyonga or you're a member of North Haven Golf Club or Westwood Ho. I think everyone feels like they're in it together with regard to golf. It's go to Asia and it's sort of the rich person's game, if you like. So it is a sport for everyone here in Australia, and that shouldn't be lost on us. But it has meant that Live Golf Adelaide has vastly different eyeballs and numbers and interest and excitement compared to the other 13 Live Golf events that'll go on around the rest of the globe. I did hear a funny line about Live Golf Riyadh the week before, which was played under lights. And Eamon Lynch, who's a very clever and intelligent golf writer, made the point that it probably allowed them to hide the lack of galleries that were in the shadows off the fairways, which is a clever line. So, yeah, that is a curiosity. It's making huge losses. There is some talk about they're going to potentially the PIF, which funds Live. The PIF is the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia, is potentially going to invest in the PGA Tour. And then from there, are they interested in putting huge amounts of cash into a rival league? And the pinch point for that does come shortly, because I'm well aware that a number of their biggest name players are up for contract renewal. So if they're going to sign Bryson DeChambeau, if they're going to sign Dustin Johnson and all of these other big names, then the millions and millions and millions of dollars they're going to have to be up for is going to put this format of the game into astronomical amounts of debt globally across the program. So is that sustainable? You'd probably say it only is because it's Saudi Arabia who's funding it, and they've got a bottomless pit of oil, so therefore they've got a bottomless pit of cash to invest in these sorts of things as well. But when you compare it against the TV numbers and the losses that it's making, it is hard to see how it gets sustained right through to 2031 when we're talking about still hosting it here at North Adelaide. And then the other issue, Wallace, I'm just uncomfortable, and I made this point on Double A the day it happened, and I've probably toned myself down a little bit since then. It was a bit of a snap judgment, but I just am stunned that we've just automatically decided that Greg Norman is the person to redevelop the North Adelaide golf course. I think there are a number of people who would be eminently more qualified, and I would love to at least hear their opinion, their thoughts on what we could do with what's a pretty good tract of land before we just automatically hand it over to Greg Norman. Greg, I made the point that if you want a bang average golf course, then you get Greg Norman to design it. That's probably unfair. He does know what he's doing. He has a big organisation of people who are well entrenched in golf course design, but I would argue there's a number of other, even bigger names around the world in golf course architecture who would create something really, really special at North Adelaide. And for the 50 weeks of the year that the Live course isn't used by the Live players, it would be a destination course for people coming from interstate and overseas. And that, you can't say that Greg Norman courses do necessarily attract people to come and play these destination type places. So if that deal's done, it's done. And that's, in my opinion, unfortunate, because I just don't think it'll garner the sort of traffic that we would hope it could.
Last Monday night, there was an ex-captain was talking on ABC radio, and he was talking through the fact that the plan that they've got is 18 holes with a driving range. And a driving range that close to the city would be like Moore Park, which is just a license to print money. New clubhouse and a facility which, would be wonderful. The question is the cost of it, then a course like that, the maintenance and things like that, the ongoing. And if Liv did pull out for whatever reason, who's going to foot in the bill for the maintenance and the upkeep of a place like that? Sure, it'd be wonderful, absolutely wonderful.
No, I disagree with that, because I think you put a top-end golf course in North Adelaide that is a destination course that people want to play. Well, it will be funded by traffic. There will be people like me who'll want to play it. There'll be people who'll fly in from interstate and they'll want to sign a deal to play at Royal Adelaide and play at Kooyonga, play at Glenelg, play at Grange and play the live course at North Adelaide. And they'll stay in 5-star hotels. I mean, I'm just looking over now on the eastern side of Adelaide Oval. They'll stay in the Adelaide Oval Hotel. They'll go for dinner in the restaurants here and in through North Adelaide and get their travel and all of those sorts of things. I think it's absolutely for, what are they saying, $50 million. I think it's a wonderful investment in a city course. And yes, the driving range will attract ongoing traffic and all of those sorts of things. Kevin Norton, who I think you're referring to, who's the former captain of the North Adelaide Golf Club, ripping bloke. I've had a lot to do with Kevin. I think that my concern about not the point that Kevin's making, but I just don't want to see the North Adelaide golfers who have always done golf on on a budget, if you like. I don't want to see them priced out of their golf at all. So if it's not going to be at North Adelaide, where will the $50 green fee player turn up to play their golf week in, week out? That's something that I don't think does get solved by an incredible live golf course that probably cuts down the North course maybe to 9 holes, maybe cuts a little bit out of the par 3 course for this incredible facility that you could create on what's a pretty good tract of land around North Adelaide. But I would imagine it's going to be in excess of $200 a pop to play a round of golf there.
Mate, let's move on to the local sport. What's coming up this week?
I think the big thing in local sport, and look, mate, we could sit and chat about it for hours and hours and hours, but I think the big thing tomorrow night will be the next instalment of the Sport SA Hall of Fame, which will be formally announced at Adelaide Oval. I can give you a preview on all bar one of the inductees this year. The last is yet to be announced. That'll happen very shortly. But let me just take you through some names who are going to be inducted into the Sport SA Hall of Fame tomorrow night. Mark Ricciuto at the top of the list, if you like. Oh, drop catch. So a catch has just gone down in the gully off the bowling of Brendan Doggett. So Jack Lehman, it looks like, just burst through his hands there at gully. So that's an unfortunate one for South Australia. Let me just regain my attention here. Mark Ricciuto about to be inducted into the Sport SA Hall of Fame. A Brownlow medalist, of course, 8-time All-Australian, 3 BNFs with the Adelaide Crows. Just a superstar of Australian football, course premiership in 1998. He missed the 1997 year. Milan Ivanovic, anyone involved in the world game, football, soccer, if you want to use its local vernacular, one of the all-time greats of Adelaide City. He played 200 games, around 200 games in Yugoslavia, senior games in Yugoslavia before he moved to Adelaide, represented Adelaide City with aplomb, played 300 games, was a wonderful defender, formed an incredible partnership with Alex Tobin, another iconic name of South Australian football, played 59 games for the Socceroos. His last one, he was captain as well, was part of 2 Adelaide City titles in the NSL in 92 and 94. Sarah Ryan, a swimmer who went to 3 Olympic Games and won medals at all 3 of them, 96, 2000 and 2004, part of what was just a dynasty of champion Australian champion Australian swimmers in the pool for the women. So Sarah Ryan, congratulations to her, 11 years in Australian teams, richly deserved into the SA Sport Hall of Fame. Les Favell, a cricketer who was maybe South Australia's most entertaining player behind David Hooks, our 4th highest run scorer in South Australia, only played 19 tests and 202 first-class games, but it was what he stood for as a cricketer. He captained South Australia for 95 games, led them to 2 Sheffield Shield titles, and like Hooksy after him, and even Darren Lehman after him, just played the game in a spirit that was really captured the essence of the way cricket should be played, someone we can be very, very proud of. And then there is one to come, but I'll just let you know the team which has been announced, and that's the South Australian netball team between 79 and 83. They won 5 consecutive national titles, and that group was really, I guess, the platform on which South Australian netball really developed to become the benchmark of the Australian game throughout the next 20 years, I would say. So it led to the domination of Contacts and Garville in the mid-'80s in the Australian club competition. That morphed into the Adelaide Thunderbirds and the Adelaide Ravens, who famously, the two Adelaide teams played a grand final against each other, and I think it was 2000. And then from there, it was, the Adelaide Thunderbirds as the Ravens fell away, but the Adelaide Thunderbirds, who went on and won a couple more premierships in 2012 and 2013 and stand as the dual premiers today. And it all stems back, if you look at it, to what the 79 to 83 group did, where they won 5 consecutive Australian national titles. So going to be an amazing night tomorrow night, Wallace.
Good stuff, Hookie. How's your running going?
I have had a couple of days off, Wallace, and there are some positive reasons for that. I did need to freshen up. My mileage has been pretty high, plus I've been really busy, but I'm going to put down the headphones and this microphone very shortly, and then I'm about to hit the pavement and try and polish off about 10, and I've got 10 booked in again for tomorrow. So a couple of big days coming up. Body is good. That's the main thing. Actually had an ECG done on Tuesday, saw the chiro yesterday, and I'm going to have another quick session before I jump on the plane on Sunday, which is probably pertinent, me talking about getting on a plane on Sunday. But no, feeling good, and I've had a nice little freshen up, but time to get back into it.
Fantastic, yes. As Hookie alluded to, we're going to have a 2-week break, and we're going to be posting some of the most popular interviews from the last several years. So keep your ears open for those ones, and we'll look forward to seeing you back on the 13th of March. Hookie, have a great break. Safe travels.
Will do, Wallace. Look forward to catching up with you on my return.